Okay, so I'm joined by Mark Williams from Western Union, and he's a big gooner. Mark and I often have conversations about football. More often than not, for the past couple of seasons, fairly depressing conversations. But obviously, Arsenal finished with a bit of a flourish last season, ended up winning the FA Cup in a keenly contested final with Chelsea, but of course it was the semi-final victory over Manchester City which was the surprise, I suppose, and the highlight. So welcome, Mark. We're going to do a little bit of a feature on your love of Arsenal. Tell me first off how you became a Gooner.
Crikey, that goes back a few years, Frank. As many in the region will know, I originally come from Stevenage in Hertfordshire. Having a father who grew up in East London and then was raised in Essex, he was very naturally a Man United fan. So I didn't have a huge amount of family around me to sway me one way or another. In fact, my dad did try his hardest to raise me as a United fan. I'm sure I had a United scarf at some point, which was no doubt burnt shortly after I realigned my allegiance. But Stevenage is a very Arsenal town. It's very 50-50 Arsenal Spurs. And two of my neighbours who had season tickets had a spare ticket one day. And I actually remember the game so well. It was the 94-95 season. And it was Arsenal v Chelsea at Highbury, a stadium that I've got very fond memories of and miss very dearly. And I remember everything about that day. I remember Arsenal won 3-1. I remember Ian Wright got 2. Kevin Campbell got 1. I think Kevin Campbell actually got the equaliser. Chelsea had a few names on the sheet, and obviously back then weren't quite the force that money enabled them to become. But I remember everything about Dave, Frank. I remember the smell of the burger vans walking down the road. I remember the sight of the flags. I remember the noise. I remember the feeling that I got when I first got to the top of the stairs and saw the Highbury pitch. And I remember getting home and running through the back into the back garden where my dad was mowing the lawn on what I think was an October afternoon. And I just pronounced, "Dad, I'm a gooner." and he said, "Great." And shortly after that, I had a very close relationship with still have a very close relationship with my granddad on my mum's side, who he actually grew up in Woolwich,
right?
Arsenal originally from a heritage perspective, and we got memberships, and I've been going ever since.
And of course, there was a famous book, wasn't there? Probably the first best-selling football book that I think every football supporter read and resonated with, which was Fever Pitch by Nick Hornby, a massive Arsenal fan. I've actually met Nick on only one occasion, very briefly, but an incredible book, because I think it really did manage somehow to bottle that feeling of being a obsessive football fan, which many of us are. And at that first occasion, when you go to the ground of your choice and the team that you select, I think if you're not a football fan, it's difficult to understand and appreciate the emotional attachment that we have to our teams. And of course,
couldn't agree more, Frank.
For you, Mark, you've had a period of, if you go 94-95, I mean, that's a season I remember with some fondness, because Everton won the cup. We haven't won anything since.
Yeah. Paul Rideout, was it, Frank? Paul
Rideout 1-0.
Yeah.
United. Yeah. But of course, during those years that you were watching, Wenger was an absolute legend for most of the period of his managerial career. And, you've seen them win the Premiership on more than one occasion. So what were you sort of, if I was to say to you, you can relive an Arsenal moment, you can go back in time and you can actually re-experience that moment, what would it be? What's your favourite match of all time as an Arsenal fan?
That's a really, really tough one. I mean, like you say, throughout a large proportion of Arsene Wenger's time in charge, we enjoyed great success. And it was, it was deeply saddening to see him leave, under a bit of a cloud and under, that sense of criticism, because, as much as I personally felt it was perhaps past the right time for him to move on, the man only deserves to be remembered for the great things that he achieved. Actually, I've recently returned from holiday, and I spent my time by the pool on the beach reading a fantastic book called "It's Only Ray Parlour," and it's Ray Parlour's autobiography, and he very much aligns, his career very much aligns to some of my fondest memories of going to Arsenal. And it's difficult to look past the Invincibles season for the achievement that was. It was a bit lucky. I think most sort of, head screwed on Arsenal fans would acknowledge that there were certain games that we could have lost but drew, games that we, perhaps nicked to win, but you need that luck to go 49 games unbeaten. You need a bit of a turn of fortune. At times, I think the moment that really stands out to me, because it felt so special and it was something that I never dreamt I would see, would be the first Premiership title in 1998, which was actually a double winning season. And the carnival atmosphere of the parade the day after we secured that double was, as what, a 13-year-old boy, something really quite special. Stood outside the Islington Town Hall, singing at the bus, seeing the players, seeing the trophy, seeing the flags, just being amongst what was probably 250,000 people, felt really special. And I think that one of the really iconic moments, and I'll apologise for this, Frank, because it was against your boys, was watching Tony Adams in a position where he had no right to be, as the big centre half and the donkey that he was. Receive the player 1-2 with, I think, Steve Bold, receive the ball just through the halfway line, go through 1-on-1, and I think everybody realised that could have gone anywhere. But watching Tony Adams wrap up the title felt really fitting, and then that famous sort of turn celebration, which ultimately there's a statue of now outside the stadium. I think that's probably one of my fondest memories of a few that are very difficult to choose from.
Yeah, well, it's nice that you've got many to choose from. There's some football fans who I'm interviewing this series who don't necessarily have that catalogue of riches to select from. But as an Arsenal fan, as I say, you've enjoyed some, a lot of success in recent times. Fast forward to now, and a new manager comes in place in the shape of Mikel Arteta. I think he was perhaps a surprising choice to some, and I think many expected Carlo Ancelotti, who of course ended up as Everton, to become Arsenal's manager. And again, Mark, you and I had the conversation at the time, perhaps a little unkindly, thinking that Arteta had been chosen because he was cheaper. But I tell you what, he's not done a bad job in his short tenure so far, has he?
He's not. I'm a huge fan of Arteta. And in truth, I was quite disappointed that we didn't go with him as an option the first time round. I draw my mind back to a really fantastic event that you ran in Manchester, Frank, where we had Ferran Soriano at the Tapas Bar on King Street. And it became very clear to me from Ferran's insight to the game, to football as a business, and to the runnings of City Football Group, not just Manchester City, but City Football Group, that Arteta was incredibly highly thought of. And I remember him making a comment when he was asked about Pep Guardiola's future, and he seemed to allude very directly to the fact that Arteta was very much being groomed to take over from Guardiola as a first choice for City. And actually, given that Arsenal have been struggling in recent years. We're probably not seen with the level of fear across the country and across Europe that we were once seen with. People aren't particularly intimidated by us. You know, we've not done badly, don't get me wrong. We've won a few FA Cups, which again, I'm quite grateful of. You know, but ultimately we've not been there in the league. We've not qualified for the Champions League for 3 years now. You know, so the club has seen better times, and Arteta obviously feels an emotional attachment to the club as well, because, you know, frankly, he had the City job on a plate as and when Pep decides it's time to move on. That's an opportunity to, you know, take over a Premier League winning, Champions League competing club with infinite resource and capital behind them, owned by one of the most powerful men in the world. And he turned that down to take on the Arsenal project, which I think is testament to his commitment and his affection to the club as well. You know, I've been very impressed with his ruthlessness, and very impressed with his man management. I think if you look at Matteo Guendouzi as an example of that, who made some very disrespectful comments to the Brighton players earlier this year about their earnings versus, you know, what Arsenal players are earning, etc. And Arteta said that's not Arsenal, right? We're a football club that has a degree of class about us, and we don't act like that, and it's not acceptable. And if that's you as a person, then you are not for Arsenal Football Club. He's been frozen outside ever since. You know, and he's a great talent, 19 years old, and he could be anything. Matteo Guendouzi, you know, I've been impressed with him as a player, but Arteta was willing to, you know, put that moral standard and address the behaviour over making, you know, an allowance for his ability. And it looks like he'll be leaving this summer. So I think he's a strong manager. I think that, you know, we've looked more disciplined, more organised. I think the defence is starting to look better. We definitely need to, you know, make some defensive signings. And it looks like, and I hear through some connections that I have at Arsenal, that, you know, the chap from Lille is all but done and dusted.
Gabriel, isn't it? Yeah.
Gabriel, yeah. I hear that's pretty much a done deal now, and is only a matter of time. I don't pass comment on. I have a rule that I don't pass comment on a player that I've not seen play in person. So, you know, I will leave others to tell me whether he's any good or not, and I will be the judge over his first 10, 20 games for the club as he settles in. But you know, we've got some things to address, but ultimately, I entirely back Arteta, and I think that he is the man to take the club forward. And most people who know me know that I'm not somebody who bets on my own team, because it feels emotional enough when you've not got money on it and things don't go your way. But, you know, I will be. I saw 4-1 on Arsenal to finish in the top 4 next season, which I will be taking, because I do think that's a really great price. And I think that, you know, outside of Liverpool and City, it's all to play for. I don't think that the sides outside of that are particularly strong. I think everybody's beatable on their day. You know, and I would back us to be more consistent next year. I mean, if there was ever Arteta's finish to the season was very typically Arsenal. You know, we lose to Aston Villa, who were in a relegation dogfight, scrape through Watford on the last day of the season, having been outplayed for large chunks of that game, yet we beat City and Chelsea at Wembley. Yeah. And I think that goes to show you the inconsistency issues. And I'd hope that that's the main thing that Arteta will address next year, is the consistency.
Well, it's been great to talk to you, Mark, and you're obviously backing your club for a top 4 finish, which will be a significant improvement on recent seasons. So, yeah, we'll be interesting. As you say, I think Liverpool and City are probably way out there on their own, aren't they? And I think the rest of them, as you say, depends very much on what sort of transfer window they have. Just to finish off, you know, because I'm an Evertonian, I like to reminisce, because it's the most joy I get in terms of football at this moment in time. Hopefully that'll change in the not too distant future. But Arsenal, actually, so many memories around your club. I mean, the first FA Cup final I properly remember as a kid was when Arsenal beat Liverpool in 1971. And I remember Charlie George sort of lying on the ground after he'd scored a cracking goal, and then his teammates come running up to sort of pick him up off the floor. And Charlie George, to me at that time, was very much sort of glamour player, really good talent. And then, you know, as you get older, you read books about various players saying who played with him. He wasn't that great, actually, but he always had a trick or two up his sleeve, did Charlie George. Then, of course, the famous incident, to refer to the book Fever Pitch, and the Anfield game, where Michael Thomas goes through and, against all the odds, you know, scores the winning goal that clinched the championship. And that was, I think, 1989. I think
it was 1989. It was the last day of the season. We needed to win by 2 clear goals. And in fact, it was Frank, I think I've watched that game 4 or 5 times during lockdown as part of the
ITV
football series. It was on yesterday on ITV4 yet again. And I watched it yet again. and you know, that really was quite a moment. There's you know, I used to live around Highbury for a while, and you know, speaking to, you know, a lot of the locals who have lived there for a lot of their lives, they'll remember that evening very well. And in fact, I think it's lesser known that the Arsenal team bus actually went back to Highbury, and they piled off and they went to my old local, the Gunners pub, and the players got on the beers with the fans. And the pub stayed open late, and everybody was sort of partying in the street. At least a selection of the players did. And I was, you know, I was born in 1985, and so 1989, from my own memory, is probably just a little bit too soon. I don't remember it, but you know, having seen it, you know, I can honestly say that if there was a match that I could have gone to, or that I wish I'd gone to but couldn't have done, or where I wish I'd around for, or however you want to, you know, phrase it, that would be the one. You know,
yeah, it was an incredible night.
Truly remarkable.
Yeah, I remember watching it live on the telly, and obviously with my Everton hat on, praying that Arsenal would do what was, you know, seen as an almost impossible task there, and they managed to. But to end on a positive memory, as me as an Evertonian from Arsenal, so that Liverpudlians don't just call me a bitter blue. And I'm sure that you will acknowledge one of the best Premier League goals of all time was scored by, remember the name, Wayne Rooney, and of course it was David Seaman, and against Arsenal. Seaman,
I remember it well.
What a goal that was!
He hit it like a bullet, and back then he was 17 years old.
Yeah.
As well, it was one of his first games. I mean, it was some strike, and you know, some way to announce yourself.
Wow.
You know,
absolutely, and I don't have that many good memories of playing Arsenal over the years, I have to say. So that one does obviously stand out. Mark, final word on the Gooners then. Player talk out for this season. Who do you think's going to light up the Premier League from Arsenal's perspective?
Very, very easy answer to that, Frank. Assuming he gets the pitch time he deserves, and that's Bukayo Saka. The young lad who made a bit of a breakthrough this season, played quite a lot of games under Arteta. Arsenal's youth academy does produce some really top talent. It doesn't always make it into, you know, the Arsenal lineup, but you know, the contribution of Arsenal's youth system is there to see across the Premier League and the Championship. And you know, Saka is one that I've been excited about for a while. I genuinely don't think I have seen a more talented player of his age for the last decade. I think he looks like he's going to be seriously special. He's 19 years old. He's been looked after very, very well. He's grown with confidence. I think he was in the top 10 for Premier League assists last season, or maybe even top 5. So, you know, statistically, he performed well when he played, and he is one to watch for the future. And frankly, my hope is that Arteta can continue to have the effect that he does, because frankly we need to become more competitive to keep hold of him. I think he's that good that he's the sort of player that would walk into the likes of Barcelona or Real Madrid in the future. So he's one to watch.
Mark, it's been great chatting to you as always.
Cheers, Frank.
And I'm never short of a word or two on football, and certainly not on Arsenal. So great to speak to you, mate, and I will see you very soon.